What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Hopefully, everybody was able to get, at least a little bit of rest, following a really disappointing loss. Gonna jump on here, break down the Steelers Ravens matchup from yesterday, talk through some things, about the game itself and also what it means for this team kind of moving forward. You guys know the deal, man. Win, lose, draw. We talk through it all over here. Try to stay as level headed as possible. But if you would, just make sure you hit that like button for me. If you guys could. Hit the bell for channel notifications. Make sure you're subscribed. All that stuff is greatly appreciated on my end. Also, just kind of curious about I'll just say the temperature of the fan base, how confident you guys are in this team, following back to back touchdown losses, mainly in the perspective of does this 2 game stretch make you guys feel differently about, their ability to, break this postseason streak that they've been on in terms of trying to win in the playoffs? Like, do you still feel like that's in the cards? Like, what's your level of concern, I guess, about about how this team's playing right now? But, as always, kind of want to start, really on the defensive side of the ball in this one, because I think it's the more pertinent thing to discuss. Really Baltimore's offense come in, like we talked about all the statistics. It's a really impressive group. They've got one of the best running backs in the league. They got an MVP candidate at quarterback. And I just really felt like the Steelers defense offered very little resistance. Of course, the necessary context, and I'm sure that that's going to come up a lot on like social media, is that the Steelers defense was incredibly banged up, and you have to acknowledge that, right? No Deshaun Elliott, that's your box safety. Definitely affects your ability to stop the run. Although they did roll Minka down just like they did against the Eagles into playing it more in the box. No Larry Ogunjobi kind of eats into the depth a little bit, regardless of what you think of him individually as a player. And then they even got like more banged up like during this game. No Dante Jackson to begin the game, and then Joey Porter Jr. gets banged up. Relatively quickly in the game, tries to make it back. He actually is dealing with a knee injury. It's not a calf injury. Sounds like it's his PCL, according to Nick Fairball at Penn Live. Little concerning there because he could miss a little bit of time, especially like winding down to the end of the season. Hopefully he's good. But really, the way that I would kind of look at this game or frame it is like the Steelers defense, like when they won up front, at least against the pass, they did a pretty good job on Lamar. When you look at the numbers per Pro Football Focus, I tweeted these out yesterday. When Lamar was under pressure yesterday, he was 2 for 8 for 16 yards and I think 1 sack. So really good numbers. They did a good job on those reps. When Lamar was able to be kept clean, he finished the game 14 of 16, 193 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 pick. So when the Steelers pass rush won up front, the defense looked really good. When they were kind of stalled out and they didn't get home, or Lamar got the ball out quickly before guys could get there, it looked pretty bad. They got shredded on the back end, and that's going to happen. When you're playing some backups on the back end against those Raven receivers. I thought you saw some of the youth pop up at times, especially, just in certain moments, like not understanding like down and distance, not playing to your leverage, not playing to your help when they're playing coverage on the back end. Play that immediately comes to mind. They're running that smash concept in the red zone, and towards Trice's side, he kind of bites up on the little out route, and then they run the corner, kind of leaves KZ out to dry a little bit, run the corner behind him, and it at least what you want from him on that play is you want him to try to like midpoint those 2 receivers and at least make that throwing window a little bit more condensed instead of having a pretty easy throw for a guy like Lamar. But really, I mean, they were just kind of outmatched from a matchup standpoint on the perimeter, and that was fairly obvious. There's not really much else you can say about that. They tried blitzing. Of course, they played a ton of single high. Tried blitzing, a lot of zone. Didn't really matter what they were doing, to be honest with you. But in terms of like stopping the run, that was probably the more disappointing thing. I thought against Philly last week, the game plan was good because they did, sell out to stop the run. They, for the most part, did accomplish that. But this week, played a lot of, 8-man boxes, things like that, and it just didn't matter. Henry ran pretty much all over him. You look at Henry's numbers, he finishes with 162 yards, 58% rushing success rate. I mean, that's just absurd for a defense that takes this much pride in stopping the run. I thought a couple things were notable in this one before even getting back to the film. One, the Steelers have not tackled well the last 2 weeks, and that's kind of been something that this group has been able to hang their hat on throughout the course of the season. Just in terms of like getting as many hats to the ball, wrapping up, not allowing a bunch of yards after contact. That was not the case again in this one. So it's back-to-back weeks where that's kind of popped up. And then also, I think there were definitely times where Baltimore won, just in terms of creating push or displacement off the line of scrimmage. But I also thought that the Steelers kind of overcorrected to some of their mistakes in the first matchup. Now, if you remember when we did the film room about, and at the very end of the film room, I mentioned this. Hey, we're gonna have to get this cleaned up because Baltimore's gonna go back to it, and that's exactly what they did. The first time they had some difficulty defending like the zone read stuff, and they let Lamar kind of escape out the back door on some of those pull plays, and it creates some really explosive plays from the Ravens' perspective. Now in this one, it almost felt like they overcorrected in terms of like the backside edge defenders. Instead of playing that surf technique where you're basically trying to see if you can take two, they were almost getting too far up the field, and because of that, the cutback lanes on some of those zone runs. I mean, you could drive a semi truck through it. I mean, a guy like Derrick Henry, one of the best rushers, if not the best rusher of his generation, has incredible vision already. Like that's just way too easy for him. You're allowing him to hit that cutback crease quickly and then get to that build up speed type of moment. That's really scary for a defense, and that was why they ripped off so many explosive plays. And then also, I think there were some other times where guys are trying to shoot gaps, unnecessarily trying to backdoor plays, not playing discipline type of football. And then that's kind of what you get. I mean, Baltimore pretty much did whatever they wanted. You look at the numbers: 53% success rate overall, 50% in trying to run the ball, 56% trying to throw the ball. I mean, it looks pretty easy, man. Like 6.7 yards per play for them. They did, whatever they wanted. So it's a really frustrating outcome, like I said, for a Steelers defense that for the most part has played like really well this season. But I thought yesterday was, one of their worst performances. I would say, there's definitely some of that where you can kind of just hand wave it and say, like, oh, we got a bunch of backups in the game. Like, it is what it is. The one thing that really frustrated me in particular, though, was in the red zone. The first touchdown, the Baltimore gets into like an unbalanced line. They're playing like a four strong concept. Basically, they bring motion over, and the Steelers don't pass off the routes correctly. They're trying. It looks like they're probably trying to play man coverage. Nobody goes with likely to the perimeter. Easy touchdown. I really want to watch that one back on film just to try to see like what was going on the back end on that one. And then they came back to it later in the game. So they bring Zay Flowers over to kind of into a bunch formation, and it's Cam Sutton. He's running with him. He looks like he's pointing to Minkah like, hey, switch this, switch this. Him and Minkah don't switch off, and Mark Andrews is wide open in the middle of the field. So it's just like one of those things where the Steelers kind of shot themselves in the foot. And speaking of, shooting yourselves in the foot, I thought the offense did that multiple times in this game. Most notably, like the play that everyone's probably going to remember from this game is, the Russell Wilson fumble inside the 5-yard line. I thought that Russ actually did some really good things like early in this game and had some nice flashes. It was just a little bit more volatile than you kind of needed in a game like this where the margins are so tight. Did some really good things in terms of like extending, play creating, making plays with his legs, throwing the ball down the field. I thought the throw to Calvin was outstanding later in the game. In terms of like, the metrics, in terms of like how they were moving the ball, it was a lot better than what it was last week. Granted, against, a worse defense, but it looked a lot better. But that fumble was a huge swing. Baltimore ends up going 96 yards. Of course, you want the defense to pick you up in that instance, but Baltimore goes 96 yards to 14-point swing, and then even the pick six late. You get the lucky kind of interception. Lamar overthrows a guy after Zay Flowers stopped running in the middle of the field. Mika picks it off, runs it back. You got the ball with a chance to, go really get yourself back in the game. And then, we're running a play action bootleg and he leaves the ball like inside. And it's just like, that's one of those, I called it, unforced errors on Twitter after the game, just because, even if that ball's completed, right? Like you really want to get that ball out to the flat, even if it's completed, it's a 2-yard throw. You know what I'm saying? It's like of anything, anytime you're throwing to the sideline, just like the gold rule. And Russ knows this. He's a potential Hall of Famer, but like anytime you're throwing to the sideline, you can't be late and inside. So, the passing game obviously left a lot to be desired in terms of consistency, but I did like some of the things that I saw. The rushing numbers looked really bad again from a success rate standpoint. The Steelers finished with a 27 rushing success rate. It's just not good enough, man. One of the things that they did do that I was kind of encouraged by was they did try some new things. It was really funny. Like the first, I think, touchdown drive that they had first or second one that they had, they did every single thing that we had been begging them to do on this channel in a span of like 8 plays. They got into the gun. They ran some gap plays out of the gun. They ran dart, which is just like tackle wrap, where you get a puller, everybody blocks down. And then, off of that, they had a nice little like play action pass concept out of the gun where they were able to kind of draw the second level defenders up and throw that in breaker to Van Jefferson right behind them. So they did some different things in terms of, utilizing play action, running the ball more out of the gun, getting downhill a little bit more instead of relying on so many rushing concepts that, kind of take place outside the tackles. But as good as it was to kind of see those things, it just really didn't materialize into any sort of consistency. Now, the other change that it felt like they made was Najee Harris was outsnapped by almost double to Jalen Warren in this one. I have no idea what that meant. That could be a game plan type of thing. That could be a matchup type thing. I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. I thought that Jalen had some decent moments. He did have a fumble. He also missed a blitzer and pass protection, which kind of stalled out a drop. But no, they definitely left opportunities on the field for sure, and then just the two costly penalties. And then, you look at things in terms of, the luck aspect of the game. Baltimore put the ball on the ground, I think 4 times. They didn't recover any of them. So I mean, it's just one of those things where, you know, luck sometimes doesn't the ball doesn't bounce your way, things like that. But Calvin Austin continues to play pretty solid. I've actually really enjoyed like some of the things that he's done for this offense. Of course, he's kind of being miscast as their like top receiver at the moment because Pickens being out with the injury and just their lack of like other options. Pat Freiermuth was really quiet again for back-to-back weeks. We talked about they needed to get him going, especially in the middle of the field. They weren't able to do that, especially without Pickens. That would have been like a top priority for me to get him going, and that just wasn't the case again. But Calvin did some really nice things. I mean, the deep ball was awesome. Him kind of contorting his body to the sideline to make a contested catch grab, but he also like beat man coverage on a runaway. There was at least like one more time where they showed the replay on Fox where he was running a little drag across the field. I think it was on the Wilson fumble where he was getting separation. So he's getting open. Obviously, there's some limitations there, but I do like some of the things that he's brought to the table. I think the right side of the offensive line continues to struggle. We talked about that in the preview. That was the case again yesterday. I'm just not really sure or have a ton of confidence that this run game, or specifically like that side of the offensive line, is going to look all that much better over the course of the rest of the season. I think that is particularly alarming because of how this team wants to play. But I just think that's the reality of where we're at. And speaking of realities, in terms of like where we are at this point in the season, the Steelers haven't dropped 2 in a row, losing to Baltimore. They've kind of left the door open for the Ravens to come back and take the AFC North crown. So Ravens play the Texans on Christmas. Steelers played the Chiefs. Of course, short week for all 4 of those teams involved. It's going to be really tough to get up to, bounce back quickly. The Chiefs 14-1, I think now. So not to say that they're like completely unbeatable, but it's going to be tough sledding. Just based on the way that things have, played out over the last couple of weeks, it's looking more and more likely that this is going to be a team that's going to have to go on the road and on wild card weekend. And it's something that you wanted to avoid. And of course, when you start 10-3, and for your schedule, it's going to be really disappointing if that ends up being the outcome, just because it probably, if they finish with, 10 wins or 11 wins or something like that, it's not really that much different than maybe the preseason expectations for a lot of the fan base. But it just sucks because, you had it right in the grasp of your hands in terms of being able to secure a home playoff game for the first time in a little while with fans. And just obviously there's a huge advantage to having that. Now, I will say, like, going on the road, if you had to go to, like, let's just say Houston, for example, or something like that is a good matchup. I actually wrote on Steelers Now last week about, ranking the most favorable and least favorable matchups for the Steelers in the first round. And like Houston was like, I think the second most favorable matchup that I talked about in that article, just because of some of the matchup advantages that they'll have in that one. So, but yeah, that's just kind of the way I feel about that. It's just kind of unfortunate, like where we are now in terms of like having to scratch at claw, and they're still technically leading the division, but obviously, the Chiefs kind of on the radar now. That's going to be a tough one. So we'll see. But as always, I really appreciate you guys tapping in with me. Just be sure on the way out, like, subscribe, drop me a comment. Let me know what you guys think. Y'all think they're going to get a home playoff game, or you think we're headed on the road? Let me know. I'll holler at you guys soon. We do have a short week this week. Obviously, with the turnaround, we got Christmas. I will try to have the Chiefs preview up on the channel. Hopefully around like 24 hours or so. Definitely the day before. So on Christmas Eve, I'll put the preview up for you guys, so you guys can watch that. Have plenty of time, but with the holidays and stuff, I know a lot of people are probably doing stuff this weekend, next weekend. Just please make sure you enjoy the holidays responsibly. Spend a bunch of time with your family, your friends, all that stuff. And I will talk to you guys very soon. Peace and love.